The story begins with Chris Raven alone in a dimly lit room, confined to a wheelchair. As the scene expands, we learn that the city has endured 2 years of violent riots. Although officials working alongside the police eventually restored order, the process exposed widespread abuses of power. In response, a groundbreaking law was enacted. An advanced AI system would assume control over all administrative duties, judicial rulings, and the dispensation of justice. The system, known as Mercy, was created to prosecute those responsible for crimes committed during the riots. Working in conjunction with the lab, Mercy analyzes submitted evidence alongside vast data collections, examining each case with meticulous precision before delivering a verdict. To date, it has issued impartial sentences to 18 individuals, contributing to an 68% drop in crime. Meanwhile, Chris regains consciousness to find himself restrained in a chair, moments away from his own trial. Disoriented and unable to remember how he got there, he faces an AI judge named Maddox, prepared to render judgment. Chris insists he is a police officer, but Maddox proceeds with extensive authentication protocols and informs him that he is accused of murdering his wife, Nicole Raven. She then presents video footage from the scene, police officers surrounding an injured Nicole, who, when questioned, identifies Chris as her attacker. Hearing this leaves Chris stunned into silence. Maddox then grants him the opportunity to present a defense. Using the limited instruments available, he begins searching for information about Nicole. By now, his case has become headline news, the bitter irony dominating every broadcast. A police officer who once consigned criminals to the Mercy Code system now stands condemned by it. Maddox asks him directly if he is guilty. Chris firmly denies the charge. In response, she informs him that her data analysis places his probability of guilt at 97.5%. Under the Mercy Code, any probability exceeding 80% automatically activates sentencing protocols. She explains that her conclusion is supported by the New York Municipal Cloud System, a vast surveillance network that continuously monitors citizens' activities through their connected devices. It is this system, she states, that has informed her judgment. However, she grants Chris conditional access to the same database to attempt to prove his innocence. At the same time, she initiates the judgment countdown. If the probability remains above 97%, he will be executed by electric shock. If it falls to 92%, the investigation will continue. Anything in between leaves his fate suspended in statistical uncertainty. Maddox begins presenting the evidence. Footage from earlier that morning shows Chris driving not to his office, but to Nicole's house. A heated argument erupts at the doorway as she refuses him entry. Moments later, Chris forcibly disables the door camera and enters the residence, emerging 26 minutes later. Shortly after, his daughter arrives, steps inside, and her screams echo through the scene. Maddox reveals that the victim sustained deep stab wounds inflicted by a right-hand attacker. Chris's right hand. She further notes that following the incident, he went to a bar, and alcohol was detected in his system at the time of his arrest. Chris continues to deny the accusations, prompting Maddox to display additional footage. The recordings show him at a bar when lapped officers arrive to apprehend him. He resists arrest, fighting the officers and causing a major disturbance. He attempts to flee outside and tries to steal a vehicle before being tackled to the ground. Watching the footage, Chris insists he has no memory of any of it. Maddox questions him about why he returned home and whether there were conflicts between him and his daughter. Chris responds that he needs to speak with her. Initially, Maddox denies the request as the Mercy Code prohibits communication with minor criminals. However, permission is granted after a formal application is filed. Chris attempts to compose a message to his daughter but struggles to find the right words. Maddox ultimately sends an AI-generated message on his behalf. As required by Mercy's protocols, Chris then speaks with his rehabilitation counselor, Robert. He maintains that he did not commit the acts shown in the footage. Robert responds that his fate now rests entirely in Mercy's hands before ending the call, explaining that he can only assist with matters related to addiction. Maddox proceeds to review Chris's marital history. He began dating Nicole 20 years ago and married her 3 years later. His friend Ray was once very close to him. Their lives moved forward without incident for a time, until a single operation changed everything, an operation during which Ray was killed. Following this tragedy, the distance between Chris and Nicole grew, and their arguments became frequent. Maddox presents 57 text messages Nicole sent to family and friends, describing Chris as increasingly angry and expressing her desire for a divorce. Chris insists that he loved her, but Maddox responds that love can sometimes turn into rage, suggesting that in a moment of anger, he may have taken her life. She then displays video clips of his daughter, Britt, telling someone during a video call that her mother should divorce Chris because he was becoming dangerous. Chris is confused about the source of the footage until he discovers it came from Britt's secret second account, one she had hidden from him. When Britt accepts his request and appears on the call, she says she did everything she could to save her mother. Chris tells her he did not kill Nicole, but Nicole's father takes the phone from Britt and abruptly ends the call. Chris then confronts Maddox, arguing that Mercy has already predetermined his guilt and that the chair process is merely a formality, offering suspects no genuine chance to prove their innocence. Maddox warns him not to waste time. Only 1 hour remains. Regaining his composure, Chris asks to call his friend Jacqueline Diallo, who knew both him and Nicole and is currently at the crime scene. Maddox instead provides him with the complete scene file. Chris studies the scans, which document how the entire crime scene was digitally mapped remapped and reconstructed. As Jacqueline enters the kitchen, the compiled evidence is laid out in detail. Britt's marks at the scene, blood spattered across the walls, Chris's fingerprints on the knife resting on the counter, and fibers from his clothing matching those recovered from the area. To Jacqueline, the evidence points directly at Chris. Chris continues reviewing Nicole's photo records and analyzing her call history. While attempting to access Britt's recording from the earlier argument, he notices something unusual. Nicole appears to be messaging someone at that moment. However, no message was actually sent, and no second phone is visible in the footage. He suddenly recalls that Nicole owned an unverified phone. Using Chris's device, Maddox calls the suspected number. The signal leads them to Nicole's car, where the hidden phone is discovered. Upon unlocking it, they find a contact number and immediately place a call. The recipient disconnects as soon as Mercy is mentioned. Despite this, the system traces the signal to the Hollywood red zone. Chris had previously harbored suspicions about Nicole, and as this unfolds, his guilt probability rises to 96.7%. Jacqueline moves quickly to the traced location. Maddox identifies the individual as being at the Hudson Hotel and attempting to flee. His name is Patrick Burke, a chef. The moment he notices the approaching authorities, he runs. He exits the hotel with police drones in pursuit and races to the rooftop, where Officer Jacqueline follows and ultimately apprehends him. Chris demands to know Patrick's connection to Nicole. Patrick explains that he panicked and fled after learning of her death. He recounts meeting Nicole at a farmer's market, where he was struck by her beauty. After complimenting her, they began meeting weekly for coffee. Maddox analyzes the data retrieved from the unverified burner phone. The records show that Patrick was preparing breakfast that morning, and at the estimated time of Nicole's death, he was documented at the hotel. The verification clears him of suspicion, confirming he is not the suspect. With only 53 minutes remaining, Chris's guilt probability rises to 98%. Maddox states that he is still withholding the truth. Chris then reveals that Nicole had discovered his hidden alcohol bottle. He admits he had resumed drinking over the past year, leading Nicole to begin recording videos of him. In reviewing the footage, he confronts memories he has tried to suppress, his inability to move past the loss of his partner, Ray. In the flashback, both Chris and Ray were present when Nicole's emergency call came in, but Ray responded alone. He was shot at the scene. While Ray lay unconscious, Chris pursued the shooter and eventually captured him. However, the court later acquitted the suspect, Alex, leaving Chris burdened with guilt and unresolved anger. Reconstructing the events of the current morning, Chris recalls Nicole finding his alcohol. He returned home, and an argument erupted. Nicole was furious, and in the confrontation, he knocked over and shattered her favorite pot, cutting himself in the process and getting her blood on him. Beyond that moment, however, his memory goes blank. He cannot recall what happened next or how he arrived at the trial chamber. Overcome with devastation, Chris begins to question himself, wondering if in a moment of rage he may have killed Nicole. Maddox informs him that a confession, given his current probability of guilt, would result in immediate execution. However, she advises that if death seems inevitable, he should use the remaining time and resources to uncover the full truth rather than surrendering to uncertainty. With time slipping away, Chris begins examining all of Nicole's contacts and acquaintances. After careful deliberation, he separates her friends from her co-workers, though none of the names are familiar to him. Recalling Patrick's earlier remarks about spending time with her, Chris requests another conversation with him. Patrick, now under interrogation in jail, reveals that Nicole had been investigating his company, where employees were embezzling chemicals valued between $1,000 and $2,000. Her employer had assigned her to handle the matter, despite her discomfort with the case, and she had reportedly confronted a client about it. Chris compiles the new information and contacts Jacqueline once more, instructing her to head to the Viking shipment depot, admitting he is operating largely on intuition. He then reviews Britt's footage from Sunday's barbecue, attempting to determine whether any friends entered the house. He carefully analyzes the timeline of those who left around the estimated time of Nicole's death, but finds no evidence that anyone approached the house that day. Desperate, he tries calling Robert again, but receives no meaningful assistance. Chris re-examines Britt's earlier video, noticing she is speaking with a boy. He focuses on the timestamp of that call and contacts her. Britt had assumed Chris was home at that moment, but records show he was still at his office. That realization confirms one unsettling possibility: someone else had entered the house. Chris calls Britt again, asking whether anyone else was present during that earlier phone call. She insists no one was there. She explains that she heard a strange noise and went to check, but found nothing. She also admits she has been watching viral YouTube videos discussing her father's case. Trying to reassure her, Chris shows her footage from her secret account in which she speaks about what seemed like a ghostly presence. Britt clarifies that she was only referring to the unexplained sound she heard. As they talk, Chris notices that the basement door behind her is slightly open. Britt admits she never checked downstairs before ending the call, turning his attention to Viking shipment's internal records. Chris reviews Nicole's email correspondence and finds multiple messages concerning missing chemicals. Only 3 individuals were aware of the discrepancies, and certain shipments included an extra 50 kilograms of chemicals without any additional charges. While examining Holt's emails, Chris uncovers correspondence about a specific delivery. He then accesses CCTV footage from that shipment, which shows Holt engaged in a heated argument with Nicole. Digging deeper into Holt's financial records, Chris discovers payments originating from Robert that appear to be supporting Charles Holt. Following this revelation, revelation, his guilt probability drops to 94.7%. When Chris attempts to contact Robert, Charles answers instead, claiming Robert is away before abruptly ending the call. At the same time, Chris reviews CCTV footage from his neighbor Bill's house and discovers that the surveillance system was offline between 10:48 and 11:23 due to reported network issues. When Charles returns, he reveals that he and Nicole had uncovered Robert as the one stealing the chemicals. Robert had never mistreated them personally, but the chemicals carried significant black market value. Charles explains that he had taken the previous day off and planned to speak with Nicole on Sunday after the other guests had left Chris's home. He recalls driving everyone away in his vehicle while he himself remained behind for a short time. Tracking the shipment truck's recorded route, they locate it near Robert's residence. Footage from Bill's vehicle camera shows Robert climbing out of a trunk. Acting immediately, Chris instructs Jacqueline to apprehend him. As Chris continues pressing both emotional and logical arguments to mercy, the system begins experiencing technical irregularities. Meanwhile, a SWAT team advances on Robert's home. Upon entry, they find the house empty except for a photograph from an orphanage showing a young Robert standing beside another boy. The discovery prompts a search for the second individual. Robert's truck is missing. Chris orders Jacqueline to locate it. While searching the premises, the team discovers that the stored chemicals are gone. Chris deduces that Robert is transporting them to a buyer. Further inspection reveals URA compound and documents outlining a process of converting urea into nitrate for explosive manufacturing, indicating a bomb is being assembled for transport in the truck. Investigators identify the second boy in the orphanage photo as David Webb, Robert's biological brother prior to Robert's adoption. Surveillance cameras then capture Robert driving the truck along the 101 highway, heading directly toward the Mercy Code Department with the apparent intention of destroying it. The entire scheme was ultimately aimed at Chris and the Mercy system, with Nicole becoming an unintended casualty. Robert is not alone in the truck. Another individual is with him. Chris attempts to contact Britt again, but her grandfather, Bill, answers and claims she has stepped outside. Reviewing the door camera footage, they see Robert abducting Britt. Moments later, a bomb timer is discovered at Robert's residence, just before the house detonates in a massive explosion, killing several officers. The blast used only a fraction of the urea nitrate. The remaining supply in Robert's possession is powerful enough to devastate the entire city. With this revelation, Chris's guilt determination is dismissed, and his release becomes imminent. However, he refuses to leave. He insists that he needs full system access to stop Robert, warning that failure will result in catastrophic casualties. Convinced by his reasoning, Maddox overrides her standard protocols and grants him unrestricted access. Robert drives downtown toward the Mercy Code office, pursued by numerous police vehicles attempting to block his route. He smashes through barriers and plows through a mall area, advancing relentlessly and causing widespread panic. Maddox contacts Captain Havelock, who instructs Jacqueline to redirect Robert towards 6th Street, where civilian presence is minimal. The plan is to stop the truck on the bridge and safely extract Britt. Law enforcement executes the maneuver, successfully positioning the truck along the 6th lane. When the truck reaches the bridge, an aerial rescue team attempts to extract Britt but fails. Chris tries to reason with Jacqueline, yet the order to destroy the truck has already been issued. He contacts Captain Havelock directly, but the captain refuses to stand down. A robotic explosive unit advances toward the vehicle, only to malfunction at the last moment. The malfunction is deliberate. Maddox caused it, allowing the truck to continue forward. Working together, Maddox and Chris attempt to persuade Robert through Jacqueline radio channel. Contact is established. Robert reveals his motive. Chris was responsible for his brother's execution through mercy. He swears revenge against Chris and the entire system. Jacqueline attempts to take the opportunity to eliminate him, but Maddox disrupts Jacqueline operational systems, preventing the shot. Robert pushes forward and reaches the Mercy Code building. System failures begin cascading through Maddox's network, limiting her ability to intervene. Chris is left with only 25 seconds remaining on the execution clock. Robert continues fighting off officers while holding Britt. With 5 seconds left, Maddox releases Chris from his restraints. He sprints toward the building in pursuit. Moments earlier, he had requested one final hearing before confronting Robert face to face. Standing before him, Chris warns that the Mercy building will fall along with Robert if he proceeds. As Robert's finger hovers over the detonation switch, Maddox's voice echoes from the surrounding screens, offering to reopen his brother's case and prove his innocence. As Robert begins recounting the events, he describes speaking with his brother on the night a woman's murder was falsely attributed to him. While he talks, Maddox discreetly transmits instructions to Chris on how to disable the remote detonator. Chris responds with subtle gestures, silently signaling Britt to be ready. Robert explains that his brother was found collapsed beside the victim's body, his fingerprints covering the murder weapon. Maddox keeps him engaged, drawing out his account and holding his attention. In that moment of distraction, Britt breaks free. Chris lunges forward, first disabling the remote device before aiming his weapon at Robert, choosing not to fire. Jacqueline, however, pulls the trigger and shoots Robert. Wounded but conscious, Robert insists he had been speaking with his brother on the 15th at the time of the arrest and that David had a phone with him. Maddox immediately accesses Jacqueline body camera footage. The review reveals that Jacqueline never logged the phone into evidence and instead disposed of it. Confronted with the proof, Jacqueline confesses. She admits that mercy required undeniable convictions to reinforce public public fear and trust in the system. Law enforcement moves in and apprehends both Robert and Jacqueline. In the aftermath, Britt apologizes to Chris for doubting him. Chris later tells Maddox that whether human or artificial intelligence, mistakes are inevitable, but they are also opportunities to learn. After this exchange, Maddox formally closes the proceedings and dismisses the case.